We've all encountered them, people who are absolutely convinced of their own expertise despite clear evidence to the contrary. The colleague who confidently derails meetings with misguided suggestions, the family member who becomes an instant expert after watching a single documentary, the internet commenter who argues with actual professionals. What drives this peculiar disconnect between confidence and competence? The answer lies in a fascinating psychological phenomenon discovered over 2 decades ago. In 1999, social psychologists David Dunning and Dunning-Kruger published a groundbreaking study that would forever change our understanding of human cognition. Their research identified a cognitive bias that now bears their names, the Dunning-Kruger Effect. This phenomenon explains why the least skilled individuals in a domain often dramatically overestimate their abilities, while true experts tend to underestimate theirs. As Dunning himself put it, the first rule of the Dunning-Kruger Club is, you don't know you're a member of the Dunning-Kruger Club. Today, we'll dive deep into this psychological phenomenon that affects us all to some degree. We'll explore its origins, its mechanisms, real-world examples, and, most importantly, how to recognize and overcome it in ourselves. Because the greatest paradox of the Dunning-Kruger effect is that the people most susceptible to it are typically the least likely to recognize it in themselves. The discovery of the Dunning-Kruger effect began with an unusual bank robbery in 1995. MacArthur Wheeler walked into 2 Pittsburgh banks in broad daylight with no disguise, robbed them, and walked out. When arrested later that night, Wheeler was genuinely shocked to learn that surveillance cameras had captured his image. "I wore the juice," he protested to police. Wheeler had covered his face with lemon juice, believing it would make him invisible to security cameras based on his understanding that lemon juice could be used as invisible ink. This remarkable case caught the attention of psychologist David Dunning, who was fascinated by Wheeler's profound misunderstanding and complete confidence in his flawed logic. It led Dunning to question, how could someone be so incompetent that they didn't even realize their incompetence? He partnered with then-graduate student Dunning-Kruger to investigate this phenomenon systematically. In their seminal study, published in the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology, Dunning and Kruger assessed participants on humor, grammar, and logical reasoning skills. After each test, participants were asked to estimate how well they performed compared to others. The results were striking and consistent. Those who scored in the bottom quartile dramatically overestimated their performance, believing they outperformed 62% of their peers when they had actually only outperformed 12%. Meanwhile, top performers consistently underestimated their relative performance. As Dunning observed, if you're incompetent, you can't know you're incompetent. The skills you need to produce a right answer are exactly the skills you need to recognize what a right answer is. This creates a double burden of incompetence. Not only do people lack the skills to perform well, but they also lack the metacognitive ability to recognize their deficiency. At its core, the Dunning-Kruger effect stems from a metacognitive blind spot, a failure to accurately assess one's own knowledge and skills. This blind spot creates an illusion of superiority that can be remarkably resilient to evidence. The effect operates through several psychological mechanisms. First is the unknown unknowns problem. When we venture into unfamiliar territory, we lack awareness of the full scope of knowledge or skills required. We don't know what we don't know. As Dunning explains, the skills you need to produce the right answer are exactly the same skills you need to evaluate if an answer is right. If you lack expertise in a domain, you also lack the ability to recognize expertise, including the absence of it, in yourself. Second is confirmation bias. Once we form a belief about our abilities, we selectively attend to information that supports that belief while discounting contradictory evidence. A novice who believes they're skilled will remember their successes, attribute failures to external factors, and interpret ambiguous feedback positively. Third is the difficulty in accurately calibrating self-assessment. Even when trying to be objective, humans struggle to evaluate themselves without reference points. In the absence of clear feedback or comparison, we tend to rate ourselves above average, a phenomenon known as the above-average effect or illusory superiority. As philosopher Bertrand Russell aptly noted, the whole problem with the world is that fools and fanatics are always so certain of themselves, but wiser people so full of doubts. This insight captures the essence of the Dunning Dunning-Kruger Effect. Confidence and competence are often inversely related at the extremes of the knowledge spectrum. While popular culture often portrays the Dunning-Kruger effect as a simple inverse relationship between confidence and competence, the actual relationship is more nuanced. Rather than a linear decline, researchers have identified a characteristic curve mapping the journey from novice to expert. The journey begins at what some call Mount Stupid, the peak of confidence experienced by absolute beginners who have gained just enough knowledge to feel informed but lack awareness of the vast terrain they haven't yet explored. As Mark Twain wisely observed, "It ain't what you don't know that gets you into trouble, it's what you know for sure that just ain't so." After this initial peak comes the valley of despair, when continued learning reveals the true scope of the domain, causing confidence to plummet. This is the critical juncture where many give up, unable to reconcile their self-image with a newly discovered reality of their limitations. Those who persevere begin the gradual climb up the slope of enlightenment, where competence and confidence slowly increase in tandem with dedicated practice and learning. They eventually reach the plateau of sustainability, where high competence is matched with appropriately calibrated confidence. What's particularly interesting is how experts often exhibit a slight underconfidence relative to their actual abilities. This expert uncertainty stems from their comprehensive understanding of the complexity and nuance within their field. They're acutely aware of the boundaries of their knowledge and the vastness of what remains unknown. As Nobel Prize-winning physicist Richard Feynman once said, "I think it's much more interesting to live not knowing than to have answers that might be wrong." This intellectual humility is a hallmark of true expertise, a far cry from the overconfidence of novices. While most experimental evidence for the Dunning-Kruger effect comes from laboratory settings and academic skills, the phenomenon extends far beyond these contexts, permeating virtually every domain of human endeavor. In professional settings, the effect manifests as the unskilled and unaware employee who consistently overestimates their performance and contribution. One study found that 95% of managers believed they performed in the top 50% of their peer group. This inflated self-assessment isn't just a harmless quirk, it often sparks resistance to feedback, stunts professional growth, and breeds conflicts with colleagues. In healthcare, the stakes can be life or death. Medical students with the weakest skills frequently overrate their own competence, risking dangerous overconfidence when making clinical decisions. One study even showed that the doctors most certain of their diagnoses were no more accurate than their peers, yet they were the least likely to consult references or seek second opinions. In politics, the same pattern emerges. The loudest voices on complex policy debates often reveal the shallowest grasp of economics, climate science, or international relations, while genuine experts approach these topics with the humility of uncertainty. In our digital era, social media has amplified this effect. Platforms hand anyone with minimal knowledge a global microphone, granting them the same apparent authority as true specialists. This democratization of opinion has led some researchers to warn of an expertise crisis, a flattening where novices and experts seem equally qualified in the public eye. As Neil deGrasse Tyson put it, one of the great challenges in this world is knowing enough about a subject to think you're right, but not enough to know you're wrong. That captures the heart of the Dunning-Kruger effect. The very ease of access to information can foster illusionary confidence. But the influence of this bias varies across cultures. In many Western, especially American, contexts, self-promotion and confidence are deeply valued from childhood onward. We're raised on a steady diet of believe in yourself messages, nurturing fertile ground for overestimation. The American ideal of limitless personal potential can inadvertently magnify this bias, encouraging positive self-ratings irrespective of actual performance. By contrast, several East Asian cultures prize humility and self-improvement, often urging individuals to recognize their own limits. Studies find that Japanese students routinely rate themselves below average across various measures, an opposite tilt to the Western above-average effect. That cultural habit of self-critique may dampen the Dunning-Kruger phenomenon by promoting more conservative self-assessments. Similarly, collectivist societies that esteem group harmony tend to encourage feedback-seeking and discourage overt self-aggrandizement, making it harder for inflated self-views to persist unchecked. Yet no culture is completely immune to the core challenge. You can't recognize what you don't know, no matter how much you value modesty. Importantly, confidence in itself isn't the villain. A healthy dose of self-belief fuels motivation, grit, and achievement. Problems arise when confidence and competence are wildly out of sync, leading to poor choices, refusal to learn, and friction with others. Optimal performance research confirms that a moderate level of confidence, enough to drive action and perseverance, but not so much that you miss your blind spots, is the sweet spot. Intriguingly, slight overestimation of one's abilities can sometimes help by boosting persistence through early obstacles. But that small, strategic illusion differs drastically from the grand overconfidence of those trapped in the Dunning-Kruger loop. Psychologist Albert Bandura noted that people with real self-efficacy bounce back from failure, focusing on solutions rather than catastrophizing potential pitfalls. That resilience stems from a globally accurate view of their strengths and weaknesses. The goal, then, isn't to extinguish confidence but to bring it into harmony with real ability, to build what experts call epistemic humility alongside self-efficacy. Yet recognizing this glitch in our own self-perception is perhaps the toughest step of all, because the bias itself blinds us to our lack of skill. The first move toward breaking free is admitting our universal vulnerability to overestimate ourselves. No matter how educated or intelligent, we can all fall prey to this illusion in fields where we lack true expertise. As intellectual historian Robert Burton warns, the feeling of knowing is not a reliable guide to whether or not you actually know something. To counteract the bias, seek honest feedback, especially from those with recognized expertise. External assessment supplies the objective mirror that self-judgment distorts. But this requires more than just asking for opinions. It demands real openness to critique, a willingness to set aside defensive impulses long enough to hear what isn't pleasant. Pair that with deliberate practice aimed at specific weaknesses, and ensure each session offers clear, immediate feedback. Without that loop, practice alone can reinforce your mistaken confidence rather than correct it. Developing metacognitive awareness, thinking about your own thought processes, provides another powerful remedy. Regularly reflecting on what you don't know, actively considering alternative viewpoints, and questioning your initial certainty can train your mind to spot blind spots. Remember Socrates' insight, the only true wisdom is in knowing you know nothing. Perhaps the hardest but most transformative antidote is becoming comfortable with uncertainty. In a culture that prizes quick answers and bold declarations, admitting, "I don't know," takes courage. Yet it's precisely that intellectual bravery that builds a foundation for deeper understanding. Aldous Huxley observed that people rarely learn from history, despite the lessons it offers. Likewise, the most crucial lesson of the Dunning-Kruger effect may be embracing that we often leap to conclusions before grasping the full picture. The Internet's vast information landscape has intensified these dynamics. Easy access to surface-level knowledge can produce a false sense of mastery, while algorithms and social media structures reward confident assertions far more than nuanced analysis. Engagement-driven feeds favor sweeping statements that spark reactions, drowning out careful, qualified discussion. Filter bubbles and echo chambers compound the issue by insulating us from contradictory evidence, leaving few chances to confront our own limitations. Meanwhile, the flood of fragmented facts, snippets of data without the conceptual framework to tie them together, creates a mirage of comprehension. As Tom Nichols writes in The Death of Expertise, the Internet expands our networks but can also give the false impression that our views are broadly validated. Mariana Popova reminds us that critical thinking without hope is cynicism, but hope without critical thinking is naive. That balance is essential for navigating today's knowledge ecosystem. The cumulative impact of the Dunning-Kruger effect extends far beyond individual mishaps. It shapes institutions, public discourse, and democratic processes. In elections, voters confident in superficial understandings of policy can drive support for simplistic or populist solutions, vulnerable to charismatic rhetoric that promises certainty. Within organizations, overconfident, underqualified employees can outshine modestly skilled peers during hiring or promotion, leading to confidence cascades, where cultures begin to prize certainty over competence. In science communication and public health, the phenomenon undermines expert guidance when self-proclaimed authorities challenge evidence-based recommendations. The COVID-19 pandemic highlighted this clearly. confident non-experts contested epidemiological advice, fueling public confusion. In education, when students or parents push for reforms based on limited pedagogical understanding, they can weaken both curricula and teacher authority. Philosopher Hannah Arendt noted that totalitarian regimes thrive when people can't distinguish fact from fiction. While the Dunning-Kruger effect may be less dramatic, it chips away at the same epistemic foundations needed for robust democratic debate and effective institutions. Addressing these broad challenges demands both personal metacognitive growth and systemic reforms. We need environments that value intellectual humility on par with proven ability, that distinguish genuine expertise from empty certainty, and that create transparent mechanisms for evaluating and sharing specialized knowledge. The journey through the Dunning-Kruger effect reveals a core paradox. As our circle of knowledge expands, so too does our perimeter of ignorance. This counterintuitive trajectory, from the beginner's overconfidence to the expert's calibrated uncertainty, shows that true mastery isn't marked by unwavering certainty but by an embrace of complexity, nuance, and the ever-present boundaries of our understanding. Grasping the Dunning-Kruger effect offers a potent lens for self-reflection and growth. It reminds us that the first step toward real knowledge is recognizing our own limits and sitting with the discomfort of not knowing. It encourages us to cultivate both the confidence to act and the humility to learn as we navigate an ever more complex world. With so many voices offering simplistic certainties, the awareness of this bias becomes more valuable than ever. It helps us tell hollow confidence apart from earned expertise, both within ourselves and in those around us, and invites a more compassionate approach to human error. After all, overconfidence often stems not from arrogance, but from the very structural realities of how we acquire knowledge. In the words of physicist Richard Feynman, I believe that a scientist looking at non-scientific problems is just as dumb as the next guy. That humility from one of history's great scientific minds underscores the greatest lesson of the Dunning-Kruger effect. Wisdom begins not with certainty, but with seeing how much remains to be learned. By embracing the paradox that knowledge reveals ignorance, we open ourselves to richer learning, more productive dialogue, and a truer alignment between our confidence and our competence.